Hey everybody, welcome to a very special episode, number 193. Wait, you guys already did that. And a half of Hero Power. I'm your host, Avanties, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Zerotio.
I'm going to skip the pleasantries. We got business to talk about. A lot of stuff's going on in the Hearthstone community, and we need to talk about it.
So, we just did an episode this past Sunday, episode 193, where we talked about the relegations in Grandmasters, and we talked about all the news that was going on. Then, Tuesday morning, something else happened related to Grandmasters, and we realized we just could not wait until this coming Sunday to talk about it. It's an important topic that we want to talk to you about tonight. But first, let me start by saying both Zerotio and myself are fans. We enjoy playing the game. Hero Power is in no way related to or assisted by Blizzard. We are an independent podcast. You guys that have listened long enough know that I have in the past done some contract work on behalf of Blizzard for innkeeping, but I am in no way an employee of Blizzard Entertainment. Neither is Zerotio.
I don't think they know I exist.
All of our thoughts and expressions are our own. And we want to talk with you about what's been going on. So, to really understand the whole situation, we need to let you know about what's been happening in Hong Kong. For those of you who may not know, back in April, Hong Kong tried to pass a bill that would allow for extradition to mainland China and Taiwan specifically, under certain circumstances. Opponents of this bill were worried that it would risk exposing Hong Kong to unfair trials on mainland China. They also argued that it would give China greater influence over Hong Kong to be able to target activists and journalists. And you may say, well, that's fine. China doesn't have freedom of speech anyway, or freedom of expression. Well, Hong Kong does. If you guys don't know, Hong Kong is a former British colony that was handed back to China in 1997 under a certain agreement called One Country, Two Systems. Basically, it gives Hong Kong its own judiciary and separate legal system from mainland China, including the rights of freedom of assembly and freedom of speech. Now, those freedoms, also known as the Basic Law, are in effect in Hong Kong until 2047. However, the activists and protesters in Hong Kong worry that if this bill were to have passed, the bill was withdrawn in September, but the protesters are continuing to protest for fear that the bill could be reintroduced. And they worry that if this bill gets passed, it opens the door for China to take away Hong Kong's basic law rights. So that is the Hong Kong situation in a nutshell. They are basically fighting for their rights of freedom of expression and freedom of speech under this law. Now, what exactly do the protesters want? The end of they want universal suffrage for the elections of their chief executive and legislative council and their parliament. They want an independent inquiry into alleged police brutality during the riots, or not riots, but
protests.
They want amnesty for all protesters who have been arrested. And they want a withdrawal of that riot description that's being used to describe the protests. Now, you've seen a lot of the protesters wearing masks and hard hats and vests and things on the news. That's because they fear for their safety. And China is preparing troops along the border of Hong Kong to keep Hong Kong contained, basically. So that kind of gets you the rough gist of what's been happening in Hong Kong since April, when all of this started. Moving on to the Hearthstone portion of this, Sunday, after the Asia Pacific Grandmasters tournaments, there was a interview with BlitzChung, who had won. Did he win the division or just his match that day?
He won his match. He actually just short of relegation.
Okay, so he won his match and was doing his post-game interview with Blizzard Taiwan when he comes on the air wearing a gas mask and goggles, just like you see the protesters wear. The two casters were talking to him about his match, and then this is just purely what I have seen as far as translations go. One of the casters said, "Why don't you say your 8 words, and then we'll end this interview?" And at that point in time, he said, BlitzChung says, "Liberate Hong Kong, the revolution of our age," which is the line that the protesters have been using as China's call to, or as Hong Kong's call to action, basically. And BlitzChung felt like this was his best opportunity to have a platform for his city, for his, for Hong Kong, to get that message out to as many people as possible. Mm-hmm. The catch is that under Grandmaster's rules, and this is under Competition Rule version 1.4, page 12, section 6.1, engaging in any act in Blizzard's sole discretion brings you into public disrepute, offends a portion or group of the public, or otherwise damages Blizzard's image, will result in removal from Grandmasters and reduction of the player's prize total to 0, in addition to other remedies which may be provided for under the handbook and Blizzard website terms. So, he did this on Sunday. Tuesday morning, Blizzard released an announcement stating that BlitzChung had been effective immediately. BlitzChung is removed from Grandmasters, will receive no prizing for Grandmasters Season 2. Additionally, BlitzChung is ineligible to participate in Hearthstone esports for 12 months, beginning October 5th, 2019, and extending until October 5th, 2020. They will also immediately cease working with both casters. Okay, so that gets us up to Tuesday morning. All of this has happened, between Sunday and Tuesday. Now, this is where it kind of goes off the rails and goes a little wonky. So, a lot of the community was really upset over, I guess you'd call it, Blizzard kowtowing to what people felt like was China.
Yeah.
Basically, a lot of the community immediately felt like the reason this happened was Blizzard getting international pressure from China to do something about this guy who basically, to China, is a terrorist. China looks
Yes.
at all these protesters as terrorists, plain and simple. China doesn't believe in freedom of speech. They don't believe in human rights. They're a totalitarian government, and that's just the way they are. And, China is a large, large portion of the global economy.
Yes.
Specifically in the entertainment sector. China watches almost more Western produced movies than the U.S. does. Look at as an example, look at the Warcraft movie. When the Warcraft movie launched in the States, it only did like 26 or 30 million dollars. It cost $150 million to make. In China alone, that movie did almost $160 million, which saved it. It would have been considered a box office flop if not for China. China has like 312 million PC gamers just in China alone. So China is a huge, huge portion of the global economy. Now, that said,
Yeah, and also, to add to that, one of the earnings calls showed that mobile Hearthstone packs for 2018, mobile Hearthstone pack purchases, 35% of purchases were in China.
That's correct. And
huge.
And U.S. purchases, I think, were down 10% year over year.
Yep.
So, you've got to take those things into account. But something else is, you always hear people calling for human rights abuses until it affects what? The bottom line.
Yeah.
Specifically Hollywood. Hollywood's really bad about, we're going to stand up for this, but, go see our movie. So anyway, Tuesday morning, Blizzard releases this ruling that BlitzChung is removed from Grandmasters, and immediately the Hearthstone community almost feels like Blizzard overstepped. So, Zerotio, why don't you give us your take on it? Because I know your take is a little different from my take, and we'll kind of compare the two and see where we land.
First off, I do want to state one fact is that Tencent is 5% shareholder of Activision Blizzard, and Tencent is a Chinese ran company out of China.
Yeah.
So obviously,
let's let them know what all Tencent owns. 5% stake in Activision Blizzard, 40% stake in Epic Games, 100% owners of Riot Games.
Yep. So I mean, obviously, Tencent and China, because any company ran out of China is controlled by the Chinese government. That's how their government runs. Obviously, that is a part in some of these decisions. Now, I believe that Blizzard did look at how this is going to affect their bottom line and their relationship with China. And if there's any evidence from, say, the NBA situation that happened, just previously, a week ago, China is quick to just pull the plug on anything that they feel it goes against what they believe in. So they pulled support for NBA, and the NBA backpedaled to try to fix that. But that's a whole other issue. If China pulled support for Blizzard, that is a huge market, huge profit loss by Blizzard. So Do I believe that there was some element of business involved? Well, some people might call it greed. Yes. But I think that is fair. I think that this situation with BlitzChung was a conscious decision. He even stated in the interview that he knew the consequences. So he's read the rule book. These aren't rules they just made up. These are rules that they had when they started Grandmasters Season 1. So BlitzChung was aware of these rules. He was aware of the consequences, and he chose to do this. Blizzard, whether it be too harsh or not, acted per the disciplinary policy. For that reason, I don't think Blizzard was wrong. Do I think they may have been a little too harsh? Yes. However, I think they were too harsh because they were likely pushed by the Chinese government to punish to the full extent of the disciplinary policy, which they did. They didn't go above the full extent. They did the full extent of the disciplinary policy. And I think that's completely in Blizzard's right.
But they did go above. Because if you read the rule, it states removal from Grandmasters and reduction of the player's prize pool to 0.
Yes.
That's the rule.
Yep.
Then they went above and banned him from competition play for an entire year.
Okay. The ban for competition play is another guideline set for all players, not just in Grandmaster's handbook. It's all players that agree to compete in any organized tournament. I've competed myself, so I've read over that handbook, and that ruling is there. If you'll notice in the past, anybody else who broke any rules or did anything that was considered, out of code of conduct for players were banned for a period of a year. So it's within the rules. It's just not that specific ruling from page 12, section 6.1. And I've read over the rules multiple times. Now, do I think that the punishment is a little harsh? Yes. But it is within Blizzard's right.
So this, to me, feels like capturing a guy who was talking bad about your king, cutting off his head, sticking it on a pike in front of the castle as a warning to other Grandmasters. This guy has never done anything wrong. This was a first offense, and I think that this was incredibly over the top, way too harsh. And I agree. He broke a rule. He is a first-time offender who has never done anything wrong in competition play. He's no Roger. I think he should have gotten a fine and maybe some sort of a suspension to where maybe he misses the first couple of weeks of Season 3. But I completely think this was just way too much. Like I said, it's cutting off the guy's head, sticking it on a pole, and going, "Hey, do you all see this? This could be you."
Yes, but I agree with that.
And let's tell them what else was in the statement, because Blizzard goes on to say, "While we stand by one's rights to express individual thoughts and opinions, except when you don't, in this situation, you're going to just throw the guy out there into the wild and be like, oh, thank you for playing. Have a nice fucking life."
And that statement is very hypocritical. And don't get me wrong on that. Here's my point. While I believe their actions are justified, albeit harsh. However, if they took this lightly, if they either didn't do anything or they did a very casual slap on the wrist, would it have gotten this media coverage? Would we be talking about it?
No, because it would have been justified at that point.
You're right. And then BlitzChung did all that for nothing.
Fair enough.
He wanted it to be a global issue. He wanted the world to talk about it.
So
I believe that BlitzChung knowingly, and the reason I believe the penalty shouldn't have been lessened just because it's his first offense is because it was premeditated. He went in and he even made a statement that he knew that not only his Grandmaster's career, but also possibly his livelihood and personal safety would be at risk when he did this. This is I am extremely impressed with BlitzChung, and I hope he's okay through all this because he is extremely brave, and he did this knowing the consequences. And I guarantee you, he is not complaining about the consequences because he knows it is now a global issue, and that's what it needs to be. Because there's a lot of blame being thrown at Blizzard, and there's a portion of it that I believe is justified. But it's not the Blizzard employees, it's not the developers, it's not a majority of the people that work out of the Blizzard headquarters in Anaheim. So everybody who's raising the pitchforks for Blizzard, and even to the extent of boycotting their games. Because here's the thing: if you boycott Blizzard with the intent of trying to drive them out of business because of this, I understand standing by your beliefs and your morals, but then you're putting people that also have those same beliefs and morals and probably are protesting in their own way out of a job.
In fact, we know Blizzard employees were protesting yesterday afternoon because they held an umbrella protest. And today, they held an umbrella protest at the Orc statue on Blizzard campus. Mm-hmm. And just to prove their point, 2 of Blizzard's primary core beliefs are think globally and every voice matters. This is a direct violation of both of those core values of your company. And the employees let them know that by covering those value plates so that they no longer are legible. You can't read those values because apparently they don't matter in this situation.
There are specific entities within Blizzard. We don't know who they are. Likely shareholders, possibly Tencent. I wouldn't be surprised if Tencent was involved in making this decision happen. Sure, the communication went through the Hearthstone esports department, but I guarantee you that was by a direct order. So I wouldn't grab the pitchforks for those people. Obviously, there has to be a bad guy in this situation.
It's China, plain and simple.
And the bad guy is China. Now, does Blizzard get some of that blame? Yes. Do I think it's justified? To a point, yes. But at the same time, all of our protests and all of our efforts to resolve this needs to go towards China. Not towards Blizzard, not towards esports as a whole, not towards Hearthstone. The bad guy here is China, not Blizzard. I guarantee you that a large majority of the Blizzard employees, even the higher-up employees, especially the ones here in the states, are against these decisions. However, if I've heard a lot of people say, well, then just walk out, quit. They have to feed their families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've even seen people say, oh, well, that's not an excuse. Jobs are easy to come by.
No, they're not.
No, they're not.
Especially in somewhere like Anaheim, California.
Especially in the gaming industry. I mean, it's rough, let me tell you.
Yeah.
And now, let's talk about some of the fallout thus far. Like you mentioned, players are canceling and boycotting and removing all Blizzard games. That's fine. If that makes you feel better, go ahead and do that. It's not going to help the situation, and it's not going to really change anything. But for you,
I don't believe so. Yeah.
Now, Brian Kibler weighed in. He's the first person we have seen, caster or Blizzard employee or Activision employee, nobody has weighed in on this situation since it happened until Brian Kibler did today. And I'm going to read you a portion of his statement, and then we'll kind of discuss it. So he said, on Tuesday, Blizzard announced their ruling claiming that BlitzChung violated one of the Hearthstone Grandmaster's rules. The penalty they imposed was expelling BlitzChung from the Grandmasters League entirely, including retroactively revoking his prize money and additionally banning him from competing for a year. I want to start by saying I feel what BlitzChung did was very brave. He knew that his actions would likely have serious consequences, not just for his future in Hearthstone, but possibly even for his personal safety. Even so, I do think Blizzard was correct in issuing him a penalty for his actions. They do not want to set the precedent for their official broadcasts being used as political tools. He said, I have seen many descriptions of the situation claim that Blizzard took action against BlitzChung for his support of the Hong Kong protest, but that's not an entirely accurate description. They did not penalize him for his political stance. They penalized him for breaking the rules of their broadcast to promote that stance. Now, Brian goes on to say, anyone that pays any attention to my social media feeds know that I am not someone who shies away from politics. I am frequently quite vocal about my views. He goes on to say, when I'm on the desk for an official Hearthstone broadcast, I leave those views at home. I might make a subtle snide remark on occasion, but I know that I'm representing Blizzard in addition to myself. He says, all that having been said, there are additional factors at play. The punishment meted out to BlitzChung was incredibly harsh. I could understand a fine or even a short suspension from competitive play, but removal from Grandmasters, clawing back his prize money, and banning him seems completely overboard to the extent that it's unwarranted and unfair. He says, I won't pretend to understand either the intricacies of geopolitical situations in China or Hong Kong or the full extent of Blizzard's business interests there. But to me, this penalty feels as if it was deeply rooted in both of those situations. The heavy-handedness of it feels like someone pushed and insisted that Blizzard make an example out of BlitzChung. That kind of appeasement is simply not something I can in good conscience be associated with. When I learned about the ruling, I reached out to Blizzard and informed them I am no longer comfortable casting the Grandmasters finals at BlizzCon. I will not be a smiling face on camera that tactfully endorses this decision. Unless something changes, I will have no involvement in Grandmasters moving forward. That is huge. Brian Kibler is one of the biggest names in TCGs and CCGs going back to the early 90s. He is a behemoth in the industry and one of your top casters, and now he's telling you to your face, you're wrong, and I don't want to have anything to do with this program going forward. Now, I want to make it clear, he at no point does he say he doesn't want anything to do with Hearthstone. I've seen a lot of people posting on social media, oh my gosh, Brian Kibler quit Hearthstone. No, he didn't. He said he doesn't want any more involvement with Grandmasters.
Yes. Now, he did put one more statement that I want to make sure we read. We did paraphrase a little bit of that, but the last statement he made was, however, I want to make clear that not everyone involved in GM has this luxury, in referring to him taking a step away. Bring that back up because that's where I was reading it. Do not take your anger out on the other casters, streamers, or employees of Blizzard. This is not the kind of decision that comes from the rank and file. Most likely, they're just as angry as you are. I know I am. So he's saying that he is in a financial position to be able to do this. A lot of those casters and streamers and Blizzard employees are not in a position to be able to just step away like he's chosen. I did notice today that he did not stream Hearthstone. He streamed Magic the Gathering Arena. So he's obviously taking his stance in his own way, and I commend him for it. Now, I by no means believe that Blizzard is in no way evil in this. They definitely have their hand in some problems that I don't agree with. Namely, the situation with appeasing China. I think China is the evil here, but there are entities in Blizzard that are making sure that they are on a Chinese agenda. Whether that's because of the relationship with Tencent or not, I don't know that, and I don't think there's a way to know that. I am not pulling my support for Hearthstone because I love the game, I love the community, and I want to support the developers that make it. Now, if the entire Hearthstone team was to walk out today and quit for some reason, I would probably just take the stance with them. But as long as I have friends and people that I know and respect working there and having that as their livelihood, I'm personally going to still support the game because obviously it's not their fault.
No, it's not. Now, that said, some of the other responses that I think you should be aware of, Mark Kern, who was one of the original team leads on the development of World of Warcraft, the original World of Warcraft, he actually made a big post about how he feels Blizzard is giving in to China and how he is ending his support of Blizzard. He's continued to support Blizzard even after he left the company by subscribing to their games. He's gone on to start a new gaming company that had a big Chinese investor. And word came down from them that they wanted his company to make a change that he didn't agree with. Well, the Chinese investor got the board to kick Mark out of his own company. He was removed as CEO because that's the power China has in the global economy.
They're the big dogs.
They are.
I mean,
so Mark went on and started another company that he is now running and developing another game. And so he felt like this was really Blizzard giving in to China. Now, he goes on and he has a great discussion with people on his Twitter. It's at Grumz, Grummz. But he actually talks about Epic's CEO. Now, we talked about Epic is 40% owned by Tencent. Well, on Wednesday morning, Tim Sweeney, the CEO and founder of Epic, came out and said, this would never happen at Epic. Epic supports the rights of Fortnite players and creators to speak about politics and human rights. Now, this is an interesting statement because of the way it's worded. The rights of Fortnite players and creators to speak about politics and human rights. He doesn't mention anything about on official Fortnite streams or on official Fortnite channels. And as Mark had pointed out, as a 40% owner of Epic, what's to keep China from pushing Tim out as CEO of Epic and installing somebody there who will do what they want them to do?
That's very true. And here's the thing, but I don't have a good opinion of Epic Games. That withstanding, this is just blood in the water. these other gaming companies are smelling that blood in the water, and they're rushing in to catch those fallen players or whatever they can do to get some of that fallback from this by Blizzard. Gods Unchained is also going around and tagging themselves on every single Twitter post, telling people this type of stuff doesn't happen in our game. You should come to our game. Why don't you play with our game? So
in another thing, Gods Unchained is also committed to paying BlitzChung the money Blizzard has pulled away. They're offering him the $10,000 up front, plus an invite to their $500,000 playoff tournament.
For a game that BlitzChung may or may not even have any experiences.
Exactly. But still, they're offering to pay him his lost wages.
So $10,000 and possibly a little bit more for that is a great investment to possibly pull hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of revenue from players leaving Blizzard. Again, Gods Unchained is smelling blood in the water. Now, it's a good business move. Don't get me wrong. But do I necessarily think they're speaking from their heart, not their wallets? No, I don't. I think they're speaking out of their wallets, and they're a business, so they should. So, I got to commend it to them. Mm-hmm. Their marketing guys are picking up really fast and saying, hey, this is a way for us to get more revenue. It's a way for us to get more players that are outside the game, and it's good on them. But we have to remember, this is all business. Blizzard made their decision because of business. All these other companies, it's because of business. And I know a lot of people say, oh, Blizzard's just a greedy company. They're a company. Of course they're greedy. If they weren't greedy, they wouldn't be successful. There's nobody at Epic Games. There's nobody at Gods Unchained or Riot, any of these that aren't greedy. Because if they're successful and they're in the position they are, it's because their shareholders know that they know it's all about the money. Mm-hmm. None of these businessmen, none of these CEOs are hired because they got a good heart. The only game development company or gaming company that I've ever felt had a bigger heart than they did a wallet was Nintendo, or is Nintendo, where they've actually taken, shareholder and CEO and executive pay cuts because of failed projects. But that's the only evidence I've ever seen of a company that has taken their morals over profits.
Yeah.
And this is no different. And I don't know why we would expect Blizzard to do any better. Just because we like the game, just because they throw BlizzCons. You got to remember, you pay a lot of money to go to those BlizzCons. They don't do anything for free.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk about BlizzCon for a minute, because it's coming up in 2.5 weeks. And there are already talks of staged protests. And I'm not talking about the Jesus people with their Bibles saying, taking pictures with Diablo, saying all the gamers are going to hell. We're talking gamers showing up to protest Blizzard and BlizzCon over their stance. So if this happens, how do you think this affects BlizzCon?
It doesn't. I've been to BlizzCon. They have this perimeter around the entire convention center. You don't get close to it unless you have a paid ticket. And if you have a paid ticket to protest, you're not doing it right, because you're paying them to tell them that they're doing something wrong. Okay. So obviously it ain't going to matter.
All right. The other thing that just happened today, and this just happened, earlier this afternoon. If you guys are unaware, Winnie the Pooh is banned in China because protesters were comparing China's President Xi to Winnie the Pooh, saying, oh, look, putting them up side by side, saying, look, President Xi looks like Winnie the Pooh. Ha, 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 ha. President Xi banned Winnie the Pooh and all images and cartoons and everything related from the country. You can literally go to jail for owning Winnie the Pooh anything. Today, the protesters have started using the image of May from Overwatch. And they've even got her with a mask on that has Liberate Hong Kong and has all the iconic imagery. They've got pictures of May in red dresses, and they're using her the same way they used Winnie the Pooh. Now, what happens if China bans May and all uses of her likeness from the country?
They won't.
Well, that people would say, well, they won't ban Winnie the Pooh. Disney has too much pull.
Yeah, but
They
Disney is not a Chinese company.
Blizzard is not a Chinese company. Blizzard owns May.
Blizzard has shareholders, a decent amount of shareholders in China, and they will influence the Chinese government not to ban May because it's profits. May makes them money. Winnie the Pooh doesn't make China money. May makes them money.
Well,
and I believe the Chinese companies that would normally influence the government to do something like this, they're going to see through this. They're going to know it's a ploy to try to take revenue away. Now, would I love to see that happen? Yes. I think it makes for a great story. It'll go global, and it'll bring this issue to light even more, which I think is the important thing, is that we talk about this issue. However, I don't they're going to see through it. I mean, it was done too obviously.
Yeah.
And people like us are talking about it.
Right.
And so that means everybody knows why they're using May. I think it's funny, and I think it's hilarious, and if it works, they're brilliant, and I'm wrong, and I love that. But I don't think it's going to, because May can make them money.
So the other thing that we've been seeing is in World of Warcraft, people have been changing the names of their guild to Free Hong Kong. People have been paying to change their battle tags to Free Hong Kong. Well, as of a few hours ago, Blizzard has blacklisted Free Hong Kong. It can no longer be used as battle tags or logins or guild names or anything like that.
This angers me. This part really angers me because I have been very vocal on Twitter about clearly spelled profanities in people's BattleNet names, and they've said that the filters are doing what they can't do anymore. Now they can block Free Hong Kong, but they can't block the F word. Okay, that's something that I don't understand. Again, I want to reiterate that I don't think Blizzard is blameless, but I want to make sure that we go back to the issue is the majority of the blame needs to be on the Chinese government, and that they are trying to take away the rights of the Hong Kongers. And that's the issue that we need to be on. And I want to make sure because I know we're getting a little long in the tooth time-wise, I want to make sure we go back to the fact that BlitzChung is very honorable, very brave, and I hope he comes out of this with as much of his self as he can. I know their government is ruthless, and I'm hoping that he's safe, his family's safe, and he can get through this. Obviously, he's going to have the support of various companies and the esports community and community members like ourselves. But I think he'll be fine on that side of it, on the gaming side of it. I think he'll be fine. I just worry about him on the personal side, and we're just gonna have to keep our prayers. If you're one that prays, pray for him. If you just give good thoughts, give good thoughts. But he's a very brave individual, and I hope whatever he can get into in the future, he's successful.
There you go. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us this week. We hope we were able to maybe clear up any confusion or misconceptions you may have had. Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. As always, heropowerpodcast@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter at heropower_cast. And we'll see you guys on Sunday for a regular episode 194.
See you guys.
Good gaming.